What's up, people? Welcome to another BenCast vlog. Hope you're doing well and having a good week so far. Today we're doing an interview. An interview of who? Of me. A couple of weeks ago I asked you to ask me any question you'd like on writing and fantasy, publishing, self-publishing and anything in between, or anything you'd like to know about little old me. And ask questions you did. And today I'm going to attempt to answer as many of those questions as possible. Alright, here we have my trusty questioning device, and let's start off with this one. This question is from Rochelle Jones. Hopefully I'm pronouncing all of these names right as we go through. But Rochelle Jones asks, if you could pick and mix a soundtrack for your books, what would your music score be? Well, Rochelle, I can answer that one pretty damn quickly. For the last couple of books, I've been actually creating soundtracks and suggested listening playlists, which I put into my books, and they are available on Spotify. So I'll put a link up where you can find them. I've done one for Heart of Stone, the Scarlet Star trilogy, the whole Chasing Graves trilogy as well. So yeah, find out a bit more about my music tastes. Bit of a spoiler, it does lean towards the heavy side of the spectrum. But again, I've tried to include some eclectic choices as well, because a lot of film music inspires me, a lot of work by Thomas Newman, Ludovico Einaudi, a lot of soundtracks, that sort of thing. Anything like that, I'm down for. Next question! Derek Cooper asks, if you could sit down with any fictional character, again for a few pints, who would it be? If it's going to be one of my characters, first of all, I would say it's either Farden, because I mean he's my first and main character, or it would be the Knight of Dawn from the Heart of Stone. I think he would be just hilarious to go drinking with. He'd get you into a lot of scrapes as well. At least Farden would have the magic to get you out of it. If it were to be anyone else's fictional character, Logan Ninefingers from the first Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I think he would be another great person to have a drink with. Plenty of stories. As long as you don't piss him off or make him angry, I think you'd be fine. Derek also asks a completely pointless question, his words. Marmite, do you love or hate? And he says there is actually only one correct answer. I agree with you, Derek. I hate it. It's disgusting. No thank you. Take your Marmite away. On a similar vein, Peter Dowles asks, chocolate or ice cream? Chocolate ice cream. In all seriousness, I'm a big fan of both. Yeah, I'll have both. Dark chocolate, always my favourite, and Cherry Garcia, my favourite ice cream by Ben & Jerry's. The next question is from Kelly Bowers. Kelly asks, why did you choose indie publishing and what are the drawbacks/benefits? Very good question indeed. I chose self-publishing back in 2009. I just finished my debut, The Written, book one of the Emaneska series, and I was looking for a way to get that book out there. Initially, I thought that way would be the traditional route of getting an agent, submitting to a publisher, and then hopefully that publisher taking my manuscript on and publishing me. The more I started to research that path, the more I realized the timescales, which can be quite long, I realized they didn't really suit me. The reason being is I was very passionate about getting started on my author journey, getting The Written out there, and I was also working a range of very depressing dead-end jobs that I wanted to break out of. So for me, writing was my vehicle to get me out of that dead-end career path, not even a path at all, and get me on a proper career path in an industry and a market that I absolutely loved and was so passionate about, both fantasy and writing. So I'd started to feel a bit lost and like I'd hit a brick wall and feel like I didn't have any other option. And then I started to do some more research into publishing methods and realized there was something called self-publishing, which had been kind of generating steam and building up since the early 2000s and even the late 90s. The more I started researching, the more I realized that there was this viable chance of doing it. Other authors were doing it to great success, the platforms were there, and I had a mindset of being independent anyway, thanks to spending a couple of years studying music. So to me, everything just fell into place and I thought, right, I can do this. I can see myself acting as a project manager, finding professionals to work with like cover designers, editors, formatters, and using all of them to produce a professional format that I can then publish, and then it's all down to the marketing. And that brings me to my benefit and the drawback of self-publishing. The first benefit is you get to do what you want. You are the project manager. You are a self-employed business person with a product or multiple products that it's down to you how to sell. And that is what I love about self-publishing. You have complete creative control. You can work with professionals you want on your timescales and produce anything you want, okay? As long as it's of a professional standard, of course. The drawback, however, is that increased workload. It doesn't suit everyone. And there have been times in the past where I found myself completely snowed under by publishing and admin and marketing. So there is a bit more work as an indie. However, like I said, it is possible, it is viable, and it's become ever more viable since 2009, 10 years later. Damn, I've been at this a long time. So that's it in a nutshell. Way more creative control and creative freedom, but a higher workload, and you do have to work at it for quite a while. Next question. This question comes from Becky Lanaway, who asks, who is your favorite author and who inspired you to write? Oh, two answers to that one. The first answer happens way back when I was a kid. My parents force-fed me, blissfully, thank you parents, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, any bit of Tolkien that they could get their hands on. And I devoured it as a child. So that was the foundation of my inspiration and also the foundation of my love for fantasy. So you could say the first answer was J.R.R. Tolkien, thank you very much. He was responsible for instilling this love of fantasy, but also detail and the complete mastery of world building and the depths and heights you can go to with an alternate world. The second answer comes in a little bit later in life, because I spent a lot of my young years writing books. I wrote my first book by the time I was sort of 11, 12, and then a couple more after that. And then, yeah, life. General life and growing up kind of made me come away from writing a little bit, and I dabbled in music and I dabbled in other things. I was going to join the RAF at one point. Can you imagine me in charge of a plane? No thank you. In any case, at one point in university I was chatting to a friend of mine who recommended I should get back into writing because I was feeling again a bit lost. So he shared a book with me. That book was called American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Still one of my top favourite books of all time. And that book inspired me in so many different ways, in the way that Neil uses language, in the construction of the story, the characters, the blending of ancient mythology with modern times. And it just opened up a whole new world of ideas. And that was one of the main inspirations behind The Written. So this was in 2008, and I spent the next 18 months just crafting M&S, and here I am. So, in summary, I would say Tolkien and Neil Gaiman, among many, many other authors, but we won't get into that. Next! Top fan Shane Schumacher asks, if any of your series were to be televised, how would you prefer it? A Game of Thrones style series or a cinematic adventure similar to Lord of the Rings? Ooh, I would like to have a series, I think. Reasons being, although I'm a massive cinephile and I love the cinema in general, I believe there's still too much in a book that you can cram into even 3 films, 4 films, 5 films. And I love the idea that a series can tell one part of the story, take a break to tell the next, and keep going. And you have more time, you have more character development, and of course for the the watcher, the viewer, you can binge it as well. And I think we are leaning towards that more binge-worthy TV trend at the moment, the Netflix, the Amazon Primes, etc. So I think a series would work. Next question. Will Davidson asks, how in the holy hell do you format dialogue? I understand this question. Sometimes when you start writing dialogue, you can think a bit too much about the formatting and it slows down the flow of the conversation. So if I'm ever feeling the flow, I ignore speech marks and things like that, and he said, she said, and basically the tags that enable you to figure out who is speaking, and I just go for it and I write the entire dialogue, back and forth until I have the flow and it feels natural, and then I go back and add the formatting if I need to, and it just becomes second nature after a while. You kind of get used to putting the speech marks in and making sure you've got a full stop or a comma depending on what's after the bit of speech. I do stick to the single speech mark that came up on the Facebook page a little while back, and I do kind of make sure that it's real simple and straightforward. And if there's 2 people, you don't need speech tags every time, because you can figure out that there's a back and forth, so it can tidy up some of the dialogue real nicely. Next question! Corey Scott asks, which of my series is my favourite and why? Oh, that's a toss-up between M&S, which is, like I said, my foundation, my rock, the first thing that I produced and also fell in love with. It's also what I'm working on now. So that's always going to be my favorite. But Chasing Graves, my brand new trilogy, has kind of snuck up there recently because I'm very, very proud of it. It's also the first series I've written in first person, and that enabled me to add a lot of wit to the main character, Caltro. And yeah, he's just, one of my favorite characters, right up there with Farden. So I'd have to say Emaneska, Chasing Graves, depending on which day you ask me. James Balmer asks, how many books did I publish before reaching a comfortable, steady income enough to live on? So this is different for every author. Also, the more books you have on the shelf, the more chances of a revenue stream you have. So for me, I went full-time in 2015, about 4 years ago now, and that was around the time that I was publishing or finishing off the Scarlet Star trilogy and producing The Heart of Stone. Books number 6, 7, 8. And so that took me a while, but I experimented. I kind of switched genres. I went from Nordic fantasy and Emaneska to Weird West alternate history and then a standalone. So, if you spend more time creating more of a franchise and a brand and producing more books than one series, which is what I'm doing now, 10 years later, then I think you've got a better run up at it. And I think you might break even and start making a living and an income sooner. Darcy Johnson asks, what has been some of the hardest struggles you have encountered in your writing career and how did I overcome them? Very good question, Darcy. One of them is self-doubt. Authors work in an individual basis, usually in a solitary basis as well. So self-doubt can creep in there pretty easily and sort of plague you, and without other mindsets or opinions to bounce off of. This is why beta readers and editors and reviews are so important. You can kind of get in your own head a little bit. And that's when the self-doubt sneaks in and tells you you're not good enough, or this chapter's rubbish, or you're not working hard enough, all sorts of things like that. It's so common throughout authors, it's unbelievable. It just seems to be part of the way we work. Again, maybe it's the creative, artistic aspect of it. So self-doubt is a difficult challenge, and some days you overcome it, some days you just gotta do something else and distract yourself from it. So that's still a struggle that a lot of us are overcoming. Otherwise, workload, like I said earlier, it can be really, really stressful sometimes, especially around book launch times, and you're organising cover designers, formatters, editors, all that sort of thing all together. So that can be stressful. Next question. Shane Schumacher also asks, what has been the hardest death to write in any of your stories? So right now I'm going to go, spoiler! This is going to be a spoiler for Pale Kings. If you haven't read Emaneska Book 2, Pale Kings, just mute me for a second, skip forward 20 seconds or so. Now that the spoiler warning is given, I can reveal that the hardest death I've ever had to write is Far Fallen in Pale Kings. Man, that was tough. Even though it's so long ago and there have been plenty of other characters that I've killed off and written to their ends, Far Fallen's death was shocking. It was almost uncalled for. It took me off guard when I figured out that Vice had to do something like that and it had to end like that. Yeah, that one was tough, and for such a majestic animal, such a majestic character, it was really tough to just give him such an ignoble, almost accidental death. Whew, still gets me, man, still gets me. Far Fallen, even though there are other dragons now, Tower Dawn, lots of other amazing characters in the new Emaneska series, Far Fallen will never be forgotten. Also, it's one of the first major deaths I had to write as well, so that was, so you never forget your first. Alright, end of spoiler over. We will now go back to some more questions to finish off. Dylan Smith asks, what inspired you to write Farden as a broken character struggling with addiction and struggling to even live his life? Well, my theory, I like writing broken characters. The reason being is I think as humans, none of us are actually perfect. As much as we might know someone who seems like the paragon of perfection, got everything in their life sorted, the nicest person you could ever meet. Everyone has a dark side, everyone has secrets, everyone has flaws, everyone has drawbacks to some degree. And I think that's great, that's beautiful, that's what makes us human. So if I were to write a character that was absolutely perfect, made all the right choices, it wouldn't be realistic. Even in a fantasy setting with people wielding magic and riding dragons, these are still human characters I'm writing for the most part, or at least characters with human traits. And I think to be able to connect with them as readers, as fellow humans, we need to see a truthful humanity reflected in them, and that is a flawed humanity. So Farden is an anti-hero. I've made him a bit more flawed than your average person. He does struggle with addiction to Nevermind, the drug that numbs his magic. He loves making a bad decision. He really does. He's got a temper. Also, his flaws get him into a lot of scrapes, and therefore it's enjoyable, and the flaws have an impact on the actual story. They're not just there to give him a bit of spice and flavour. They affect his decisions and therefore the outcome of the Emaneska books. So it kind of, it all rolls into one. So yeah, and also it was fun to write, The final question is from Marie Eleanor Matheson. Marie asks, what's the hardest thing about being a writer? Well, aside from all the aspects I mentioned about being an indie, that aside, the hardest thing about being a writer is writing.
What did you say?
It's tough, it really is. You're pouring out your brain onto a keyboard or page. That's the hardest part, and it's also the funnest part. Some days you can just sit down and the words will flow out of you. Other days it will be literally like pulling teeth. Managing each day one after the other and constructing that book and persevering through the doubt and the changes and all of that, that's tough. But if you can do it, damn, it feels good to be a writer. So I will happily pull teeth all day long if it means I get a book at the end of it. And that's all the questions I can fit into this vlog. I will be doing this again, doing another interview vlog and giving you another chance to ask me any question you'd like. But thank you so much for all those questions. They were great, really interesting. I hope I gave you some insightful answers. Sorry if I didn't get around to your question today, but thanks so much for getting involved. It really meant a lot. So that's me for this vlog. I'll be back next week with a Fantasy Author Lounge interview, and also back soon on Twitter and Facebook with some more updates on the Forever King and some snippets as well. So until then, take it easy.